You see, the conclusion and the confusion that's happening with most people that are caught up in the legal system is they've taken what is reality and they've mixed it into a non-reality, and then they end up, because they believe in the non-reality as being real, or the fictitious assigned title, they surety it. Makes sense, right? If you've been deceived, you'll actually believe that something which is false is true. So when we go into Paul's writings, we go to the book of Timothy, and I think it'll be easy to kind of lay out the format of where we're going on this, because you'll actually see the wisdom that is found in Scripture. Paul wrote in Timothy chapter 1, verse 4, 1 Timothy 1, verse 4, he says, "Neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which minister questions, rather than godly edifying, which is in faith, so do." Now, okay, so we're looking at, now there's Paul, who's part of the Roman Empire, and remember the word romance was basically to lie. It was to tell a fiction. So romancing is not a good name, and of course it comes from the Romans, so you can understand the Romans were a society based on fiction and fictitious titles that they assigned upon the people. And Paul was very well versed in this, having been, basically part of the nobility of Rome. Most people don't realize the word freeborn meant of nobility. And that's why that soldier was quite concerned when he tried to arrest him and found out that he was of that Roman nobility. Certainly today, if you said to an officer, would you arrest an American or a Canadian, they'd have no problem all day long doing that. So certainly when Paul said he was a Roman, it couldn't have meant the same thing. In fact, Paul was part of the elite of Rome, and therefore with his background being freeborn of nobility, they had tax-free land, and they had privileges that the commoners did not have. So basically the situation is, Paul, when he's writing in this, you have to understand the depth of what he's really saying there. I had mentioned in our previous video, I went on to a site that was dealing with ancestry research, and of course they said they were using the word fable for the last name. And so they said, stick your given name in the first name box and stick your last name in the fable box. I said, okay, now I'm going to join the dots here. I remember a scripture of Paul talking about fabled genealogies that bring about endless questions. Well, it's very questionable that you have any at all way to prove any entitlement to a fabled name. Okay, so when we look at, we're going to look at the same scripture in 1 Timothy, but I'm just reading out of the New American Standard. And 1 Timothy 1:4 says, nor to pay attention to myths and endless genealogies. It calls them myths. Now, does the legal side of the government that's based on fiction have anything to do with reality? No. So the only title that really should have been on their document legally would be anything that was fictitious. It's a fictitious title. So we go to one of the letters, of course, that was sent to the office of the Registrar General inquiring about it, what the Registrar General does. And of course, they write back a letter. And of course, they only write back to the last name because that's the only one they could be talking to. They're talking to someone who's trying to believe in the last name, which is the fiction name, the fiction title. And so, of course, they say, to be clear, the office of the Registrar General is responsible for registering information. Now we know we're in the army part, the arms, about events. The office of the Registrar General does not register people. So they don't register people, well, then they don't register anything in reality. They're registering a fabled genealogy that they're using in the fiction for another fiction, which is money. Money doesn't grow on trees, so it's a fiction. Because you believe it's real doesn't mean it is. We know it doesn't come from nature. We used to cut down trees and then use the paper and make these things, but that's not reality. We know that that's just a medium, and be careful with that one, a medium of exchange. Mediums were used in demonology. So be very careful when you're trying to conjure up mediums. We're not seeing the spell, the witchcraft, and Satan's diabolical scheme of evil and a lie. So if you want to believe in a lie, you would have to surety the lie. And therefore he'd have to get you to believe and act as the guarantor for the lie, or it won't work. So how would the legal work without someone who's a consensual, voluntary guarantor surety to take on the responsibility for it? You remove your consent, you remove what is real out of there, and all they have is a fiction, which is all that Caesar could have. We're doing this to ourselves by our consent.